Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we really jump into complex ideas, sometimes dense policy documents, all sorts of fascinating stuff, really, to pull out the core insights you need. Our whole mission is just to cut through the noise, basically, leave you truly informed, maybe with some surprising facts, hopefully keep you hooked. And today we're doing just that. We've got a policy proposal that looks at a really persistent challenge from a radically different angle. We're taking a deep dive into this document. It's titled Crime-Weighted Deportation Protocol for Illegal Immigrants. This isn't just any paper. It's a pretty rigorous proposal from Lev Nemotin, PhD. And just for context, Nemotin's background includes some serious work in national security, even nuclear nonproliferation. So, expects a very structured, analytical mind here. His proposal really aims to sort of re-engineer how current deportation systems work, offering this fresh data-driven view on what he sees as inefficiencies.
Exactly. And that's really what this deep dive is all about, isn't it? We're going to step past the headlines, get into the real nuts and bolts, the proposed mechanics of this policy. So our mission for you listening is to just distill the most important nuggets of knowledge, the insights from this document, give you a shortcut, really, to understanding a very different, very analytical approach to what's often a pretty debated and complex issue.
Okay, so let's unpack this right from the start. What's the fundamental issue Nemotin sees with the current deportation system? He really focuses on these fixed quota practices, like that often cited goal of, say, deporting 3,000 individuals per day. So from his analysis, what's the problem with just hitting a number?
Well, what's interesting is his critique isn't just about, operational glitches. It's a pretty strong indictment of the system's actual design. The executive summary in the document is quite blunt about it. It argues this kind of fixed quota thing. It accidentally creates three big problems. First, it incentivizes bureaucratic inefficiency. Just think about it, right? If the only goal is hitting a number, what's the easiest way? You go for the simplest arrests, not necessarily the most important ones. It's kind of like an ER prioritizing scraped knees over heart attacks just because it's faster to hit a patient scene quota.
Ah, okay. So it's not about people being lazy, maybe, but the actual structure, the quota itself, forces less impactful choices. That's a powerful point about the design.
Precisely, yeah. Which leads straight to the second flaw he points out. It prioritizes ease of arrest over danger to society. Yeah. If you're under pressure just to meet a daily head count, you're probably not looking hardest for the most serious offenders. You're looking for who's, simplest to find and process. And maybe the most critical point, the third one, it may lead to deportation of minor offenders while serious criminals remain. And that's, according to the proposal, a huge misdirection of resources and, a clear public safety concern.
So what does that really mean then for effective enforcement and safety if you're working under those kinds of rules? Are we talking about just a slight inefficiency, or is it more fundamental?
Oh, it's argued to be far more than slight. Nemotin suggests it's a fundamental misallocation of critical public safety resources. The implication is pretty clear.
Yeah.
If the system's only focused on hitting some arbitrary headcount, it's just not optimizing for public safety. It's not optimizing for removing the most dangerous people. It basically turns a strategic effort into just a numbers game, potentially leaving the real threats, unaddressed.
Okay, so here's where his proposal gets really interesting. Takes that sharp turn. He introduces this concept that completely redefines what's even being measured. If just counting bodies isn't the way, what's Nemotin's answer? He proposes this thing called a crime grade index. How does that fundamentally change the approach?
Right. He saw that counting bodies wasn't really getting the job done, so he introduced what he calls the crime grade framework. It's basically a 1 to 25-point scale designed to quantify the severity of crimes they often encounter. And it's not just some arbitrary ranking. It's meant to be a structured hierarchy, bringing a consistent, objective measure to something that can often feel, subjective. To give you a feel for the range, if you look at Table 1, crime grade reference in the document, at the very top end, grade 25, you're talking really severe offenses, premeditated murder, rape, child abuse, things like that. Then you move down a bit, grades 20 to 24. That includes stuff like human trafficking, drug trafficking, gang violence, still very serious, high-level crimes.
So it's not just a general badness score, but a really specific point value tied to how severe the crime is.
Yeah.
And how far down does the scale actually go?
Exactly. Mid-high range, grades 15 to 19, you've got armed robbery, major assaults, identity theft. Then lower mid, grades 10 to 14, things like domestic violence, DUI with injury, cybercrime. And right down at the bottom end, grades 1 to 9, you find offenses like Minor theft, drug possession, public nuisance. So pretty much every type of offense gets a grade. Now, the key thing to grasp here is the criteria for assigning these grades. The document states it's based on harmfulness, irreversibility, and moral weight. What's kind of fascinating about those criteria is Namotin isn't just saying, let's use the existing legal boxes. He seems to be pushing for a more universal, almost philosophical basis for prioritizing, suggesting maybe our current legal definitions don't always perfectly capture the true societal impact.
That is a critical point, but I mean, who decides the moral weight? Couldn't a system like this, even if it's well-intentioned, potentially open the door to subjective interpretations? Or even, political influence in grading crimes? Does he address that risk?
Yeah, that's a fair question. The document really emphasizes creating a consistent basis for decision-making through this transparent framework. The idea is these grades would be established, they'd be auditable, kind of like sentencing guidelines are. So the intent is to remove that subjective case-by-case stuff by assigning a predefined score to each crime type. Of course, any grading system can face scrutiny, but laying out explicit criteria like harmfulness and irreversibility is meant to aim for objectivity, to try and avoid exactly the issues you're raising.
Okay, makes sense. So if we're not deporting a fixed number of people anymore, like that 3,000 head count, how does the daily goal actually change with this new system? What does the deportation process look like day to day?
It's a pretty radical shift from the old way. Instead of the goal being deporting 3,000 individuals per day, the new goal is what the protocol calls a crime-weighted quota. Here's how it works. First, we assign each undocumented individual a crime grade using that index we just talked about. Then second, we sum the crime grades of deported individuals daily. So the new target isn't a head count at all. It's a target sum of severity. The formula is laid out really clearly. Crime grade 3,000, where it ranges from the most dangerous downward. That 3,000 number in this new context, it basically keeps the system's output capacity the same as the old headcount goal, but it totally shifts the focus to severity. It means the system automatically prioritizes people with higher crime grades, working its way down the list.
Wow, that's a really interesting reframing. So it's not about how many people are removed, but about the collective impact or severity of those who are.
Exactly right. This new system, it aims to ensure a few really critical things. First, obviously, that dangerous offenders are prioritized. Addresses that major flaw of the old system where serious criminals might get missed. Second, that resource deployment is rational and dynamic, meaning enforcement efforts go where they actually have the most impact on public safety. And finally, it aims to make sure that eventually all identified criminals are deported starting from the top. The system should just smoothly transition to targeting less serious crimes once the most serious offenders are dealt with. It's about systematically clearing threats, biggest first.
This sounds incredibly strategic, logical, focusing on severity over just sheer numbers.
Yeah.
But did it actually work in practice?
Yeah.
How did they test this crime-weighted deportation protocol? Did they run simulations or anything to see if it would hit those goals?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They didn't just leave it as theory. To see if it held water, Namotin's team ran a mock demonstration, like a simulation, basically. It's detailed in Section 3 of the paper. They used 10,000 mock individuals and gave them randomly assigned crime grades from 1 to 25. But crucially, these grades were distributed to reflect real-world prevalence. So it wasn't just an even spread. It was designed to mimic how often different crime severities actually occur in the real population. And then they ran this simulation over 10 days.
Okay, and what came out? Did the results actually show that prioritization they were aiming for?
The results, yeah, they're outlined in Table 2, 10-day deportation summary, and they're pretty compelling. They really highlight the difference in approach. Under this new crime-weighted system, the total deportations per day, it averaged only about 120 individuals, roughly.
Whoa, 120 compared to 3,000.
Exactly. A huge contrast to the 3,000 individuals the old fixed quota system might target daily. However, and this is the absolute key point, the crime grade sum per day hit exactly 3,000, consistently met the severity goal.
Wow. Okay, so even with far, far fewer people being deported each day, the impact measured by that severity sum stayed constant at the target level. That's really counterintuitive if you just focused on headcount, isn't it? What does that say about maybe the hidden costs or inefficiencies of the old system?
It's a powerful point, yeah. And what's really telling from the simulation results, the top 50 deportees per day, they all had crime grades from 22 to 25. So it showed immediate, sustained prioritization of the absolute most severe cases. The clear trend they saw was Each day prioritized the highest graded individuals, automatically filtering the list. The system just kept going after the biggest threats first. What's fascinating, really, is how the system just automatically focuses resources on the worst cases. It doesn't need someone manually overriding or giving specific instructions each day. It's just built into the design, which is, incredibly efficient for allocating resources.
That is a powerful demonstration of how the proposed system could work to meet its goals.
Okay, so pulling back a bit then, what are the main takeaways, the big conclusions from Neymatten's analysis and this simulation?
Well, the conclusions, they're laid out in Section 4, and they really tie it all together nicely. The first key takeaway is pretty direct. Fixed numerical quotas, like that old 3,000 a day target, are crude, prone to inefficiency, and risk misaligned priorities. They just don't get you the optimal outcome for safety or for using resources well. In contrast, the analysis concludes that this crime-weighted quota system offers a more ethical, effective, and rational framework. It's not just about removing people, it's about strategically removing the ones who pose the biggest risk. And this approach ensures that ICA targets the most dangerous individuals first, but importantly, it stays on track to ultimately clear all identified offenders. It's a structured, methodical way to work through the whole list, starting at the top. Right, so it's really about changing the whole definition of success away from sheer volume and towards actual impact. But does the document mention anything about potential public perception or political pushback? If fewer individuals are deported overall, even if the severity score is met.
That's a good point. While the document doesn't explicitly dive deep into public perception strategies, it does frame the system itself as transparent, auditable, and adaptable. Adaptable to future changes in crime patterns, immigration law, enforcement capacity, whatever. This suggests it's designed to kind of withstand scrutiny by being clearly measurable and flexible. The implicit argument, I think, is that the public ultimately cares more about removing genuinely dangerous individuals than just hitting some arbitrary headcount number. And this really brings up a bigger question, maybe for you, our listener. What does this specific proposal reveal about how we could maybe apply similar data-driven approaches to optimize other really complex, resource-heavy societal challenges? It goes way beyond just this one policy area,
And that really wraps up our deep dive into the crime-weighted deportation protocol. We've gone from understanding the inefficiencies of a simple headcount system to really appreciating the nuance, the strategic focus of this severity-based approach. It's a fantastic example of how just looking at data differently, asking different questions can lead to entirely new policy ideas and potentially much more impactful results.
So as you go about your day, maybe mull this over. Beyond the specific policy, how might applying similar structured, data-driven thinking, focusing on impact over raw numbers, help in other areas? Think about areas where resources are tight, where prioritization is absolutely key. It could be healthcare, environmental protection, maybe even planning cities. How might understanding this kind of framework encourage you to think critically about other systems where maybe we're measuring the wrong thing?
Exactly. Well, thanks for joining us on this exploration. Stay curious, keep asking those questions, and never stop diving deep into the fascinating world of information out there. We'll catch you on the next one.